the PNC does not own the mobile home, just the real estate. She wants to make sure her family can keep their mobile home there for however long they want and continue to live there after she sells it. So, Chris, putting you on the spot, do you have any ideas on how to solve that problem?
You're basically giving your family a life estate. You're giving them possession. It usually doesn't work out the way people want it to work in the practical world, because you have to put it in legal language.
Welcome to episode 105 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silberman Law Firm where we talk legal news and practical law. It is January 16th, 2026. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host, and I'm joined by Chris Heald, who is the supervising attorney at the firm and our co-host. Chris, the Coke dealers in Miami are very happy, and they're scrambling to get their inventory up because Michael Irvin is on his way back for the big game.
Is that a thing?
That's a thing.
You're going to hit me with that one. I didn't realize Michael Irvin was a user of, but I guess. But
I don't think he still uses it. But we're gonna talk about that a little bit today. Let's go and talk about what's on our docket, what we're going to cover today. So we're going to have a legal question section, and that's about it. And we're going to cover defamation and whether my comments about Michael Irvin were in fact defamatory. And then we're going to talk.
It's all my mind is thinking about now. I'm like, wait a minute, how am I going to end this show by saying, hey, just so everybody knows? Okay, good. But you're always ahead of me.
Chris was very concerned that we were defaming Mr. Irvin, but we'll talk. Well, my comment had purpose. It was also a joke. And if you know the history of Mr. Irvin, but we'll talk about that and defamation. And then finally, we'll answer some questions about reversionary interest in deeds and life estates and how to rise up from the grave and control land. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and get it kicked off. Chris, what do you think? Was my comment about Michael Irvin defamatory? The one where I said, hey, he's flying back to Miami to blow some coke. Was that defamatory?
Well, I can tell you, just based on my reaction, I was very concerned, and I felt in my being that it was going to be very important that we disclaim that. I'm guessing you're having some reference to the 90s Cowboys, which I am very familiar with as a 49er fan. And there were probably some allegations because they were the bad boys at one point. But I also imagine he's denied any such allegations. So if we were simply to presume them as true, he may say, hey, that's not true. You can't go on your podcast and say that I did this or that because I didn't.
Well, okay. So let me give some history because our listeners, may not know. And we were talking before the show how we got a comment, Chris, where the person was like, "Hey, great podcast, but I could have done without, whatever the 10 minutes of Ole Miss football discussion the last show, right?" So we also get a lot of feedback where the listeners really want some female guests, but so we need to kind of listen to our audience. But so not all of our listeners may know who Michael Irvin is. Michael Irvin, Hall of Fame wide receiver, went to the University of Miami. The University of Miami is playing in the college national championship this Monday. Michael Irvin was successful at every level of the game. He played for the Dallas Cowboys and phenomenal wide receiver. I think in 1996, he was arrested. He was found in a hotel room with some marijuana, and there may have been some cocaine involved. And he ended up pleading, taking some kind of plea deal for some type of probation for cocaine possession. I believe that's the story. And he's later kind of talked about this openly, and he's done some documentaries, and I think they're Netflix documentaries. I can't exactly remember, but so that's the joke. That's kind of what they're making fun of about social media. He was They did a lot of sort of Michael Irvin footage during the last game when Miami was winning, of Michael Irvin just going crazy on the sidelines, and so he's kind of back in the public eye, and this joke has kind of been all over social media. So where do we cross the line, Chris? I mean, was it you had this sense in your inner being that you were worried that we were going to defame Michael Irvin? Let me put you at ease. Michael Irvin is very much a public figure, so the standards are very, very high. Okay. You have to prove actual malice. It's a higher standard. Now, you still can defame public figures, and obviously the joke all over social media that I um, regurgitated here, it's satire. It's rhetorical hyperbole. Okay, so our listeners are very smart people. They're going to understand that it's a joke and it's completely protected as free speech. But you cross the line when you represent that statement as actually factual, right? As true. So if I were to say, Chris, I have insider knowledge that Michael Irvin is on his way at this very moment to meet, some Cuban drug dealers from Miami to sell him cocaine so he can enjoy the big game. And I represent that as factual. That would probably be defamatory. Okay? That's not we don't that's not true. An illustrative example. Um, Michael is we have no knowledge of whether Michael does cocaine or not today. And but that's the joke. You with me, Chris? Does all that make sense?
That does make sense. Is it like a knowing standard? Does it have to be knowingly false? Or if it's false and you make it recklessly,
So so
does that
that's the actual malice component, right? Where you that's the higher standard. We just kind of skipped over that to the easier one, which was obviously, this is a joke. If you've got half a brain, you're gonna know that it was a joke. So I think there's many other cases out there in rhetorical hyperbole. We want to protect that in the United States. Now, I do feel like I'd like to say something positive about Michael. He's been married for like 36 years. So he was caught in the hotel room with the women. And obviously that's a hard conversation to have with your wife after that happens. He comes home or sees his wife, and his wife says, this is what his wife says, quote, say his wife, Sandy, his name's Sandy, quote, "Don't say a word. God has already told me that I am your wife and I'm not going anywhere, but you have to make your peace with God." I'm gonna tell you right now, this woman sounds like a saint. Okay. And they stayed married for a very long time. I think it's 36 years. Um, Now, sadly, Chris, his wife Sandy has developed Alzheimer's at a very young age. So, and this is Michael's done some interviews, and this was in People magazine, where it's basically said he has to have a 24-hour nurse for his wife because when people develop Alzheimer's, they need care. And this being a guardianship guy. Are you familiar with how agitated kind of can become and that side of it, or not really, Chris? So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And everybody's different. And,
yeah,
some people can be 80, 90 years old and only need lower levels of care. And then unfortunately, it's a
yeah,
disease that can get you. And sometimes people go downhill very, very fast and need a
yeah,
lot of care. And, you know, imagine how frustrating it would be if you couldn't remember who you were or what you were doing all the time.
yeah,
People treat you differently because they get frustrated with you, even though they love you and they know, and it's very hard on the family. So
yeah.
it's very tough.
The Urban family is dealing with that right now, and it is applicable to our practice because we do a lot of guardianship work with Alzheimer's, dementia. I think this one is the doctors have said is very rare. I don't think she's that old. Okay, I think she might be like 50 years old, definitely before younger than 65. And the experts in Alzheimer's just said it's a very rare thing to develop it that early. So very sad. Michael, is committed. He's been quoted to say he's committed to not sending her to an assisted living facility, and he's keeping her at home. And obviously, this woman, well deserving of such treatment after all that she's been through with kind of Mr. Irvin, previously. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. All right, we got to end sad at the same time. So we have to move on to our next legal question, and we're going to talk about this came from our legal chat room where all of our attorneys kind of share common knowledge, and we call them PNCs at the firm, potential new clients. So this came in. Potential new client wants to sell her land, but she has family living in a mobile home on the land. The PNC does not own the mobile home, just the real estate. She wants to make sure her family can keep their mobile home there for however long they want and continue to live there after she sells it. So, Chris, putting you on the spot, do you have any ideas on how to solve that problem? So,
Yeah, I mean, you could do it. You're basically giving your family a life estate. You're giving them possession. It
mhm,
usually doesn't work out the way people want it to work in the practical world, because you have to put it in legal language. So you have to give them a possessory right. You could just give them 100-year lease that terminates on their death. You could give them a life estate, and you could give your new buyer a remainder.
mhm,
And the life estate could be terminated if they move off.
mhm.
Um, I see that as two ways that you could do it.
I'm always impressed, and just so that our listeners know, Chris does not prepare for these shows, so he doesn't do the research. He doesn't look at the law. I look at the law before the show. I do the research, so Chris is often put on the spot, and that's 100% correct. The his initial inclination of trying to solve this problem via life estate is the best way to do it, and it would look something like the language in the deed, I hereby grant the property to, and then you're going to say the recipient's name, right, for and during their natural life. So if your family member is Bill Smith or whatever, I hereby grant the property to Bill for and during their natural life, and upon their death, the property shall then pass to whoever else you want it to pass to. We call that the remainderman. Um, that can be a third party, and maybe that remainderman is going to pay some sort of amount, some sort of money for that privilege. The family's probably getting the life estate as a gift, which is fine. But the family could pay for it. Bill Smith, who wants to live on the property as on the mobile home, could pay something for that life estate, and the remainderman could pay something for the right to own the property in fee simple after Bill Smith passes. Now, Chris, my question to you is, if you're a real estate investor and this PNC comes up to you and says, "Hey, I'm happy to sell you the property, but the the life estate is going to go to my brother Bill for him to live in a mobile home, and you can get it after Bill dies." What's that remainder interest worth, Chris?
Well, you have to discount it for, I mean,
Mm,
then this gets into like morbid stuff. You have to discount it for how long you think that person's going to live.
yeah.
So, I mean, this is what insurance companies do. There are tables. You can
Mhm,
figure it out.
mm,
Um, and its core, it's gambling, which I can relate to, but this is kind of a weird gamble, because the person could die tomorrow and the person could live 50 more years. So you're
yeah.
buying a piece of property and you're saying, I'll take it when I get it.
Mm,
The concern I would have would be, is this investor going to try unscrupulous tactics to get these people off, or,
mm,
claim they're committing waste on the property, or claim that they've abandoned their life estate and harass
mm.
them to get them off? So hopefully you've got a decent guy that's going to say, yep, I understand what I'm taking this subject to. He dies tomorrow. He dies tomorrow. If he lives 50 years, I'll see his kids in 50 years and I'll come claim my property.
Yeah, and that's exactly, the situation. You're gonna get into what would you pay for it. I mean, if Bill Smith is in poor health and he's 80 years old, I may give you, no, I'm not gonna give you market value to be a remainderman, but I think it'd be a steal, 50% of value, right? So something like that. would work. So, but if Bill Smith has great genetics and he's not, he's a non-smoker, doesn't drink, and he's 65, and I see him all the time biking up and down the highway, and he's at the gym and all that. I'm, I'm probably not going to give you very much for that remainder interest. So there's another kind of way to solve this, and I don't think we need to talk about it in the mobile home context, but this was sort of one of the other ideas. Fee simple determinable. Okay, that's sort of a fancy legal term. It's something a little bit different. It uses durational language like, so long as the property is used for such and such. So you'll see an example of, okay, I'm going to grant it to the city of Houston so long as the land is used for a public park. And if it stops being used for a public park, then it automatically reverts back to the grantor. That is a fee simple determinable, right? So you could tackle it that way with the mobile home. I don't think that's the best way to do it, but you'll commonly see fee simple determinables. We have one of these at my tennis club, Chris, where there's an old house that was given to the club in the back of the club. And the allegedly the grant language was, okay, to the Houston Racket Club, so long as the house is never torn down, and should it be torn down, then automatically back to this family who gave it to the club. And my father-in-law, who's 80 years old, he's a little bit of a hillbilly in North Carolina. He would always say, "Phil, you ought to try to go buy that house and go live in the house, and you could go walk right out your door and be right there for the tennis, right?" And I'm like, Larry, my wife is not going to really like that, but he thought it was a great idea.
Just be your in home,
Right.
but that's also interesting that, a couple of things on that. It relates back to what I said earlier, which is when you have these investors, people are, and I unfairly sometimes characterize investors as unscrupulous because a lot of them are, not all of them, but they're going to try to find ways to get what you want instead of just being content with maybe the way it was designed to be. And so you put these conditions in, people are going to try to find ways to say, oh, well, the condition's satisfied, for so long as they live there. Well, you're not living there 365 days a year. You're taking vacation. So I'm going to sue you to have this determined that this condition has occurred and now I get the property. Stuff like that. I think it's funny on a racket club thing because why would they pay the money to tear it down to immediately lose it? Like they would just give it back.
Well, okay, but here's the thing. This house is now, I think it was built in the 50s or 60s or something like that, maybe the 70s. And the thing is like falling apart, and we're constantly repairing it to keep it, going. So we've made it now. I think the last purpose is like the maintenance, storage facility for all of the lands. If you have a big tennis club, you have to employ lots of groundskeepers, right? So we've like added on to it, and we're parking golf carts and putting blowers and edgers in the thing. I've never even been inside the thing, but it's apparently like rat infested, and we keep saying, let's tear it down, and everyone is terrified that we'll lose the property. So it keeps saying, I'm like, now wait a minute. Let's let some real estate lawyers at the club look at this thing and see if we can figure out a way to tear it down. But everyone's so terrified, it's still up and it's still there. So,
the classic, like we don't want to lose the land. So we're going to do everything we can to preserve this little structure. So we're going to build a 10-story multi-unit development and we're going to keep that there. We're just going to build all around it because the land's so valuable. We can't afford to lose it, but we also, we got to keep this structure there.
What happens if it burns down? I don't know. Yeah. We get into this. The family would love the property back, I'm sure, right? I'm sure they're out there somewhere, or they would at least like to extort us for the value of the threat of taking it back. But
afford why you don't do this. Everybody
Yes.
has visions of, oh, well, this will be great. The racket club will use it. And then when the racket club's done with it, they'll just give it back to my family, or my family will be compensated some way.
Well,
And instead, we're coming up with, what about this? What about that?
well, no, this is a good example of why you don't do this. Many states, on that note, Chris, many states have these marketable title acts or similar laws to limit how long these conditions can remain valid. They're often 30 to 50 years to prevent what we call dead hand control. That's the rising up from the grave and trying to control things. Well, Texas doesn't really have a dead hand statute. In the Texas Constitution, we have some language that says perpetuities and monopolies are contrary to the genius of a free government and shall never be allowed. And then we've expanded that. That's expanded that language. And we have the rule against perpetuities, which is property must vest within a life and being plus 21 years. So you typically think about that as roughly 90 to 100 years, although people are living longer now. And then we also have this property code section. It's section 112.036F, like Frank, and it says real property cannot be held longer than a trust, held in a trust longer than 100 years. Okay. But then, Chris, you were talking about before the show. Do you remember, how we modified this? There was a law that passed for trust after September 1st, 2021. And I don't know how this got passed. This must have been lobbied for by wealthy ranch owners in Texas. But after September 1st, 2021, if a trust was created on or after that date, you can now have real estate in a trust for 300 years. So
Yeah, I thought they just basically supplanted everything and said the rule's 300 years now.
yeah,
Am I not wrong? What is the rule?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't. Not the research I did. I mean, it was a little bit. It was a little bit more, complicated than that. I think I didn't go into a lot of detail in the statute. I think suffice to say, for purposes of this show, Texas does not officially have a dead hand statute. We combine sort of the Constitution and the property code, and now we've got this 300-year thing in there. And if you're out there and you're listening to the show and you've got one of these, if you have a situation like at the racket club where you really need some analysis done, you're going to have to hire an attorney and look at the facts, and it's going to be a complex analysis. So, yeah.
I guess for planning purposes, all that matters is what the law is now. If we were to fight about the validity of a trust that was, created back in 2010, we could research the law and figure out which law applies. But I guess for drafting purposes, we're basically at 300 years now. It's we don't have to memorize the things we had to memorize.
Yeah, you throw the land into the trust and you got 300 years. I mean, it's a long time. So basically 3 lives. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I guess. So,
Bro, how do you always ask me, I'm gonna turn it on. How do you feel about that, Phil? Are you, hey, my kids can have some, I'm going to leave the rest to charity because we need to make their fortune, or are you, I want to set up generational wealth and leave it as long?
So I have an interesting take on this. I went to a very exclusive private school. I was there on a type of scholarship or financial aid, and it was my first exposure to real generational wealth at this school. And it was a lot of, oil and gas money is typically, what it was from. And I if I look back to my graduating class and all the generational wealth there, I think it did way more harm than it did good for those kids. I'm struggling to think of one kid absent all the generational money that actually did something innovative and amazing after inheriting all that money. So most of them ended up going into the family business sort of half-heartedly and didn't accomplish much. So, and the kids who went there that did not come from generational money, and I've seen this in high school and college and just, being around, those were the ones that really innovated. Those were the ones that really changed the world, so to speak. So, I'm not a fan of perpetuating generational wealth so I don't like this law. And for my own children, look, I'll be dead. I'm gonna die. There's no question I'm gonna die before my wife. Okay. The stress and blood pressure and all that, it just am. So this is probably a decision that my wife will end up making. But I do think I'm not a fan of leaving huge amounts of money to my children. I think they're better off without it. I also don't love the idea of creating these trusts that give them this kind of safety residual income. I want them to have the threat of suffering. I want them to have the threat of hunger, and I think that can be a very motivating and good thing. But I'm probably in the minority on that opinion.
No,
So,
we're in alignment and we are in the minority.
so
And it's another thing to think about, like, when you're actually faced with these decisions, right? And your kids, and you say, well, do I really want to do this to my kids? I wouldn't imagine leaving them nothing, but I also wouldn't want, because we see it all the time. I really don't like the safety net, too much of a safety net. It's okay. You got some money, you can buy a car, you can go to school, but it should, again, we're in the minority. Our opinion,
yeah,
people who do estate planning are free to do it the way they want. But
yeah.
the idea of, oh, I don't ever have to work, because some of these people are so successful and their kids never have to work.
Yeah. Well, and also I think, Chris, because of this show, I'll probably never get into those fancy East Coast country clubs that, that I'll always have to stay at the club where I joined up on the East Coast. So, they're probably not going to let me into their very exclusive ones now because of the show, but oh, well, not that concerned about it. And that brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Chris Hill has been my co-host today. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com and tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. All right, everybody have a great rest of your weekend and week. And hey, I'm pulling for those Indiana Hoosiers. Okay, despite all of Michael Irvin's cheering for. So.
All right, we got Texans too. Don't forget about that.
Don't forget about the Texans.